Hey everyone, welcome to episode 3 of the Change the World podcast. I'm super excited to have a really awesome guest that I met 3 or 4 years ago and is absolutely crushing it. He's one of San Diego's 30 under 30 award winners and has closed over $100 million in real estate at only 25, 26 years old.
25, yep.
At 25 years old, he has already done more production than most people will do in their entire career. So without further ado, I want to introduce our guest here, Sanjay Solomon.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on and to reconnect with you. I know it's been a minute since we've gotten together.
Yeah, it's been a while. Now, it's a really interesting story. Sanjay and I actually met in an elevator at an open house for a penthouse in downtown San Diego. And back then I was just doing residential retail real estate. And Sanjay was interning at the time.
I don't know if I ever told you this. That was my first ever day on the job. I
really?
had licensed. I wasn't even licensed at that point, actually. That was right as I started working.
The funniest thing is I thought you worked for the building.
Yeah, I remember that. 'Cause that was my first day at work, and so my job was to take people for the broker caravan from ground level up to, I think it was the 15th or 16th floor.
Yeah. And
all day, just up and down, up and down. And I remember I met you, and you were this young guy in a suit, and you were talking about getting your license.
My Macy's suit.
That's what I'm doing. My Macy's suit, too. It didn't fit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And I was like, oh, how do you like working at the building? You know, I was just trying to make conversation. You're like, I actually work for the broker. And I was like, I am so sorry.
It's a good start to our friendship.
Yeah, sure. Seriously. But from there, you ended up, getting your license. And then the first year I saw you closing all these multi-million dollar properties. And I've always been really curious because we both niched down on two separate things after that. You did luxury and I went into the kind of the developer investor side. But I've always been curious about the differences and really the niche of the luxury space. But before we get into that, what kind of spawned the whole idea of you wanting to intern? And I don't know what your intern structure was back then, but from going from college student to interning to 3 or 4 years later, doing the volume that you have, what was that transition and that thought process?
Yeah, I mean, I never really knew I wanted to get into real estate. I was in college, I went to Point Loma Nazarene, I was playing baseball.
Okay.
And after my freshman year, baseball was over, and I kind of had to sit down and figure out what I wanted to do with my life.
Okay.
And I went back to Colorado, and my family and my mom loves watching $1 Million Listing and Selling Sunset and all those kind of shows. And so we're watching it, and I'm not thinking about anything. I'm just trying to relax. It's winter break, right? And my mom goes, "Well, you don't know what the hell you're gonna do with your life. You don't know. You're not playing baseball. You have no plan. Why don't you look at getting into real estate?" I've always loved homes. I've loved architecture.
And your
design.
mom was an investor, right? She had properties.
Yeah, she's an investor. So she wasn't on the broker or the agent side of it, but I'd been around real estate my whole life, right? I used to show rental properties for us when I was 15, 16, 17. And I hated it. So when she's like, you should look at becoming an agent like we see on TV, I'm like, that sounds terrible. It sounds boring. I don't want to just open doors and show houses.
Yeah.
But I didn't have anything else in mind. So I'm like, I'll give it a shot. And, there's the team on one of the shows we watched that I really liked, and they're selling these great properties. And, I think my idea of what real estate was very skewed. I looked at the show and I'm like, oh, wow, that's amazing. I can do that too. And it's going to happen immediately. Obviously not the case. But that was what sparked my interest in real estate. And then I got connected to Erica, who I'm still, with at Exude. And, she gave me the opportunity to intern for her and kind of just learn.
So was that a free or paid internship at the time?
I was not getting paid. No. I mean, besides, her picking up coffee or donuts every once in a while. And getting some.
Your salary was
not
5
paid.
donuts.
Yeah. I mean, if that. No, it was an unpaid internship, and I never asked her for that. I told her when I pitched myself, I said, look, I want to work for free. I just want to learn. I think I'm interested in real estate. I think I could be good at it. I think I could help you. I just want to learn. I don't need to get paid. And she was like, okay, sure. And from there, she taught me the ropes, and I got to basically shadow her and the team she was with. And in that process, for those 3 or 4 months before COVID, I fell in love with it. I mean, it's hard not to when, the first broker's open you go to is a $12 million house, and you're like, oh my God, this is what I can do for a living, right? So, that was my entry to it.
That's really interesting. And I'm kind of seeing a trend, and as I bring more people that are in their early 20s, everyone that I've talked to started off the same exact way. I started with an unpaid internship, right? My first thing in real estate was making coffee and stapling papers.
Yeah.
TJ Miller interned for me.
Oh, that's
when
right.
he started.
Yeah. I forgot about that.
And our first guest, Antonio, was also an intern at the startup that we worked for, and so were you. And everybody was unpaid. But I see it very common in our little circle of friends that we have. But I feel like for the rest of the people going into college, like they would rather get a minimum wage job fresh out of college that's teaching them nothing
Yep.
than an unpaid internship for 6 months or 3 months or however long it is, but where they can learn the most. And I think it's super interesting that we valued the knowledge. And even today, it's like I've passed up on a lot of deals where I could make more, but I just wanted to learn. So
sure.
I took a lower commission just
Yeah.
to be involved in the deal, right?
And I think when you're first starting, I mean, you have to learn, right? You have to set the foundation and just kind of jump in head first. And if you don't do that, I mean, it's difficult. And in real estate especially, I mean, it takes a while for things to start kind of falling in order and you to start actually selling houses and making money. So, I mean, in that period where you're learning, I mean, there's not really another option besides an unpaid internship if you don't have your license, right? If you have your license, you can do assistant stuff and you can do open houses and all that. But as far as being unlicensed and just learning real estate, I mean, yeah, that's how we all started and it worked out.
Yeah. Now walk me through, a lot of people are kind of afraid of kind of reaching out, or they're looking for internships on Indeed or something like that I've run into. But similar to all of our stories, it was a cold outreach. What kind of built the courage for you, one, to reach out, and two, someone who you saw on a TV show? Because I did my internship with just like a local broker, but you went after like the big fish that was literally on national TV.
Yeah.
What was that like mindset, or when you messaged, there was some persistence, or how did it work?
There was a lot of persistence. Yeah. I mean, and it's funny because Erica tells the story. She's like, I annoyed her just enough for her to respond and be like, who the hell is this kid that keeps like asking for like my time? But I mean, from my perspective, I had nothing to lose, right? I mean, I'm in college, right? So my focus is, you know, school and doing well in school and figuring out what I want to do. So I'm like, I have nothing to lose. If these people say, no, you know, we don't need an intern. We don't want an intern. We don't want you. Okay, I'm back to square one, right? So there's absolutely nothing to lose. I think also I had a vision for what I wanted to do. I liked, you know, the nice homes and the high end stuff. So I said, you know what? These people are doing exactly what I see myself doing. Why wouldn't I go after them and see if I can just kind of immerse myself in what they're doing and give myself a head start?
No, that's super interesting. That and what was that right amount? Like from the first outreach,
Depends on who you ask.
from the first outreach to actually your day one on the job, how much time?
I would say it was about 6 months.
Really?
Yeah, because originally I had reached out to, you know, the guys on the show and I wasn't hearing back, and
the Altman brothers.
Yeah, and I didn't give up because, you know, I mean, they're selling $1 billion a year. Of course, they're not going to respond to some random kid that wants to intern for them.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then they put out a video where they're like, "Hey, we've now expanded to San Diego," and I'm like, "Okay, this is my end." And they tagged Erica, who I ended up getting in touch with, and with her, it took probably 4 to 5 months of trying to schedule meetings and following up for her to actually give me the time to meet with her and pitch myself.
No, that's super interesting, because for me, I took a different approach. I emailed like 20 or 30 different people, and the one who answered, I took that opportunity, right? For you, it was like, I want this, and I'm not going to stop till I get it. So
I'm glad it happened, or I probably would have moved on and emailed another 20 people.
No, that's awesome. Now, you mentioned it takes a little bit of time to make your money on your first deal. For me, it definitely did. Walk me through that first deal. What was it? How much was it? How long did it take? You know, and how'd you go about getting it?
It's a funny story, my first deal. So, you know, now my focus is, you know, La Jolla and our coastal markets here, but my first deal was in Lakeside. And it happened, it was like a lead that came in that I got to work, and it was this crazy old lady who was high all the time. Her house reeked of weed, like every time I went there. But we got along great, right? Like I was this young new guy, she was this old retired lady, and we just had this like dynamic. She was super sweet. I'm still friends with her to this day. And she was she had a house in mind that she had tried to buy previously, and she wasn't able to put a deal together. And she said, "Look, I love this house, but the other agent wasn't able to make it work. Like, I'll give you a shot." So for me, it was easy. Like I think I showed her one other house, and then I was able to negotiate the deal she wanted for the house that she already had in mind. And we had like a 14-day escrow, and it closed. So
now, was that house still on the market, or how did
it was still on the market?
Really?
Yeah. So she had used another agent who was referred to her, who, you know, had made an attempt to get her the home, and it didn't come together. I took over and was able to, you know, by some stroke of luck, as my first deal, never having negotiated anything, I was able to make it happen for her, and she got the price and terms she wanted, and bought the house. And then she gave me her house to sell, the one she was living in. So it was like off the bat, I think the first one was like 1.25 million. And then it was like 1.4 million was the house that we got to sell for her. So off the bat, just from this one client, I was like $2.5–3 million in business.
And that's what most people do their whole year.
Which
right?
for me, I'm like 20 in college. I'm like, damn, like this is a pretty good check.
Yeah, no, that's freaking awesome. And then, so you went from there, and then now I see you're selling homes that are 5, 10, $20 million. What's kind of like the difference between, would you say that first deal, the $1 million price point, which is kind of average here in San Diego, versus now doing 5 or 10 or 20 times that in one transaction? What are the differences in the transactions between the luxury side and the traditional residential side? For
sure. I mean, I say it all the time. I mean, I really do think, depending on who the people are, I think it's easier to sell, a $5 million house than it is to sell a $500,000 house. And I say that because most of the people that we work with who are buying and selling at that level are, they have money. They're usually older. This is not their first real estate transaction. They're not first-time home buyers or sellers where you have to hold their hand through the entire process and educate them on what they're doing. They know what they're doing. They just want someone that can execute on what they want to do.
Okay.
So from that perspective, I think it's much easier. I mean, the hardest deals that I've ever done have been, in that 800,000 to 1.5 range.
Really?
It's more complicated. People rely on you more as a source of information, which isn't a bad thing, right? But obviously, if your client knows what's going on, they're not asking you a million questions a day. They just trust you to do what you do.
Right.
So I think selling a high-end home is easier than selling a lower-end home. It's harder to get the opportunities to do that, but once you're at that point, I think it's much easier.
So follow-up question to that. How do you go about building, especially the first couple deals, building that reputation and that trust of a homeowner who has a high net worth to trust someone in their early 20s to do something like this, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think people trust someone that either has one of two things, if not both. They have someone that's an expert, or they have someone that has a long track record. And being a new agent, obviously, I didn't have a long track record. I didn't have, a whole list of sales that I'd done. So what I had to do is I had to become an expert in what I was doing and in my market, right? I wanted to go into an appointment, even if it was in a neighborhood I'd never sold something, and I wanted to know every single thing about that neighborhood, every neighbor, what they paid for it, who they are, what their business is, and become an expert.
Interesting. So you went as in depth as understanding not only who the owner is, because that's pretty easy to find, but then doing research on that owner and what their background.
One of my biggest clients right now, I met him at the gym in La Jolla. I go to Lifetime.
Okay.
And I take pride in knowing in my market who the big players are, right? And so this guy rolls up in his Bentley, and immediately I park next to him. I'm like, I know who this guy is. This guy just bought a house for $17 million. I'm like, this guy's a baller.
Really?
Because I'd done my research and I knew who he was. So I approached him. I said, hey, not to be weird or anything, I'm Sanjay Solomon. I saw you just bought that house. I sold your neighbor's house. And we just hit this conversation off. Long story short, I just got them into a rental for about $45,000 a month. Wow. I wrote an offer for his brother-in-law for $8.5 million. His brother-in-law's best friend is listing their house with me for $6 million.
Really?
All because I knew who this one guy was, because I had done my research on him.
And you prepared. It's like the opportunity met the preparation.
100%.
Though, right?
You have to be prepared 100%, because you never know when that opportunity is going to come up, right? You never know when you're going to see that person or meet that client, and you have to know your shit in that moment, right?
So. Yeah. No, that's really interesting. And we talked a little bit about getting into the space, and you became an expert because obviously you don't have the track record. Another thing that I see on your social media, and it says right there, right, off-market specialist, right?
Yeah.
How much of the work that you do is the outreach? And with these high net worth individuals, really something I'm really curious about, a lot of times their information is not as public as your typical homeowner, right? Because I do cold calls for the developers, but we're talking to, $600,000 or $700K purchase price, tiny house with a massive lot. So I understand what we can build there, and I understand we can overpay for the property most of the times, but the access to that individual homeowner is really easy. It's public information.
Right.
For these guys, they try to hide their information, right? So how do you go about even reaching out or getting in contact with a lot of these homeowners?
I mean, it depends, right? I mean, a lot of times if I can't get a hold of someone over the phone, I'm going to go to their house and I'm going to knock on their door. I'm going to see if they're home, right? I'm going to find out what other addresses are associated with them or that LLC. A lot of times people have, a PO box or a mailing address that's not tied to the property.
Correct.
So you just go and you have to research what other addresses are tied to that, and just retrace it and see if you can get a hold of them. I'd say, I've done a couple of deals where I haven't been able to call someone, but I go to the house and I knock on the door, or I send a letter, or they get my mailer. There's a number of different ways that you can hit these people that are not, having their information public. The other thing is, I have a deal right now where I could not for the life of me get a hold of these people. And so I called, some of the neighbors, and I'm like, hey, I'm not calling you about your house, but I'm curious about this house. Do you guys know them? Do you think they have any idea if they'd want to sell, whatever? And one of the neighbors actually was good friends with the family. And he's like, hey, actually, I do know them. Here's their information. The mom passed. She's thinking of selling. So it's being creative if you can't find their information to maybe reach out to the neighbors and do something like that to get their info.
Got it. And now the next question, what is kind of like the demographic of these type of people, right? Because do you see common trends, especially like people that are buying, like, let's just say modern houses nowadays that maybe are like new money, they made their money in recent years compared to like old money? Like, is there common trends in like industries and stuff like that that you find interesting with the type of clients?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what we're seeing right now, especially in my market in La Jolla, we're seeing a lot more young families and young people that have money coming down here. And then a lot of it's tech money. A lot of it's people who made their money, in 2020, in 2021, when things were kind of crazy. They invested their money in a certain place. A lot of it's people that are, higher ups with big tech companies. In La Jolla specifically, a lot of it's biotech.
Got it.
La Jolla, San Diego in general is a huge hub for life sciences. And there's a number of big biotech companies that exist in La Jolla and around La Jolla, and a lot of the people that have bought these homes are involved in those companies. Where maybe they were doctors at some point, and then they turned out how to monetize their expertise in that field and invest in these startups and invest in growing these companies. And now they've made, the money is crazy. The amount of people that have come to listings of ours who, send us proof of funds, and it's, 100 million plus in assets is just insane to me, if not more. So,
no, that's insane. And so they're coming from biotech, they're coming from all these different things. What do you think is some of the skill sets that you've had to refine to be able to talk to these types of people and have these high level conversations? Like, are you doing research as well on their industry to be able to have conversations outside of the real estate transaction?
100%. I think in any service business, you have to know as much as you can about the person sitting across the table from you, right? So if I have a buyer that gets referred to me, I want to know everything about them. I want to know their business. I want to know where they went to college. I want to know what they got their degree in, because the more things that you can have in common with somebody, the more they're going to like you, right? So, if a client went to USC, my best friend played baseball at USC, or my mom had a friend that went to USC. Anything you can do to find common ground with someone automatically creates a level of trust with them. I've also found that with a lot of these high-end people, they're not really looking for someone to necessarily sell them on something, right? There's a difference between being like the sales agent and being the knowledge agent. And I really like to be the knowledge agent. Where I go in and I'm not trying to sell them on a house, right? They're there to look at something. They know what they're getting themselves into. I'm trying to educate them on why this home, why this property, why this makes sense. Does it make sense for them financially? I'm trying to educate them on that, not necessarily be super salesy and try to, pitch them on why this is the best thing ever. And I think people at that level value that a lot more than someone that's trying to push something on them.
Now, that's really interesting. And one of the reasons I didn't get into the luxury space and didn't want to niche into it, and I'm surprised that that you did after this experience. I remember there was one open house that we went to in LA, right? I don't know if you remember. It was like a last minute open house. And we were like, hey, let's go. And we went up, and obviously we were young agents. We were maybe had a year into the industry. And it was just like a cool little car ride, right?
Yeah.
And we went out there. I think you still had your Volkswagen.
I think it was, yeah.
Yeah. So we went up, we like parked down the street so nobody saw us, and walked up. And everybody there, like their ego was through the roof. Crazy. Like, oh yeah, like the shoes that I have are worth more than your car type thing, right?
I remember that. I remember just thinking after that, I'm just like, I hate this. Like, I don't like these people. Like, get me the fuck out of here.
I was wearing like Vans and some jeans from H&M or Hollister, and I remember that. I ended up niching down with the investors because I could underwrite deals, and it's a math equation if we're going to buy the property and how much we're going to make on the back end. But you ended up going into that industry, and what I've always admired about you is you went into this industry where there's the luxury, there's, that kind of stuff, but you've always stayed super humble. Like the only way I knew about your numbers is because like I did my research on how much you've closed. But at the end of the day, you're never, every time I talk to you, you're always asking me questions. You're never like, hey, I just closed 100 million or I just closed whatever, compared to everybody else I've met in the luxury space.
Yeah.
So how are you still able to, because you have to work with other agents sometimes. How are you able to like?
Yeah, there's a lot of egos in real estate. I know we both know that, especially when you get to high and you get these agents that have been in the business for, 30, 40 years.
It's always 30 years. They're always there.
Once they hit 30 years, they just feel like they can just talk smack to anybody. But there are a lot of egos. I mean, with other brokers, with clients, whatever, and it's tricky to navigate. I mean, my opinion and the way that I live my life, not just real estate, is very low key, right? Like, I'm never going to be the guy that's boasting about myself and boasting about our numbers and my car and my shoes and this, and that's just not my personality.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people like that, and with those people, you kind of just have to let them do their thing,
really?
Right? Like, if they want to, if you've got the agent that's been in the business and they want to talk about how they're so successful and they're this and they're that, let them talk, right? They're going to talk themselves, out of breath, right? And then you step in and you know your shit and you can still, get something done. But with those people, there's no battling it. You just have to let them do their thing. That's their personality. It is what it is. Move on.
Has there ever been like a situation where you kind of had to like lean into that? Like, I'm sure like certain events in the luxury space, like it's a very flashy like side of the industry, like where you've kind of had to like be a little more boasting of what you've done.
For sure. I mean, there's always a time and a place for that, right?
Got it.
When I'm in a listing presentation, that's my time to boast about what I've done, because that's why I'm sitting with the sellers, right? They called me or I called them, and we're trying to figure out if we're a fit to work together. I'm trying to tell them about every deal I've ever done, every client I know, every high net worth person that's in my network that I could send their house to. That's my time to boast, because that's what they want to know. And they brought me in because they want to know that. I'm not going to volunteer that information to some random person who doesn't give a shit.
Yeah.
Right. There's a time and a place for that. And I think a lot of those people that we're talking about don't understand the time and place for it. And they just feel like whenever they've got an audience, they need to tell everyone how great they are. And, that's not my thing. I don't think that's our thing.
Yeah.
To those people, more power to them. And, I hope they're happy.
Very cool. Now I've seen some of the houses you've gotten to either tour or list, and some of them are super impressive. Some of them like end up on my vision boards, right?
You and me both.
for me, 20 years down the line.
Yeah.
What's the one project or property that you've been the most proud of, and why?
Yeah, that's an easy answer. We've seen and we've sold a lot of great stuff over the last couple of years. The one property I have in mind, we sold a property in La Jolla Farms, which is a beautiful neighborhood in La Jolla, on the bluff, beautiful ocean view for $17,250,000.
Okay.
And that was a great sale, because that was a deal that, I actually had cold called the owners. I had cold called them, this was before I really knew La Jolla, right? So keep in mind, I'm just calling everything, right? I'm just making calls, 150, 200 calls a day. And I call this neighborhood. I'm like, oh, wow, 11,000 square foot home must be expensive. I'm thinking like, 8 million, 10 million. I don't know values at that point. This was back in like 2020. And I get a hold of the owners and I'm like, hey, giving them my spiel. You guys ever think about selling? And they're like, actually, yeah, our kids are all in college. We're thinking about downsizing. Who are you with? And I give them our information, and I was able to set a meeting with them, and Erica and I went and then brought in the team, and then a year and a half later, everything got tied up and we sold it for just over 17 million.
Off of a cold call.
Off a cold call. That's like my one claim to fame, I feel like, in the business. The one thing that I, could have an ego about is like, yeah, we sold a $17 million house off a cold call when I was 21. So
that's wild. And that's super interesting because here's maybe a limiting belief that I have, right? Someone of that high net worth would probably have an agent they normally work with, right? So off of a cold call is crazy. And then also you mentioned 150 to 200 calls. I have a team of agents. There's 4 or 5 of us, and we're hitting the phones, right, all the time. And we're a team within a bigger brokerage, and the bigger brokerage always focuses on your traditional, open houses or talk to friends and family and this and that. But for us, we're hitting the phones all the time, because the most important thing is how many conversations can you have with homeowners. So
the numbers game, right? The more people you talk to, the more yeses you're going to get, right? No matter what business you're in.
So what's kind of your process? Is it mainly, now that you've had several years in the industry, is it more relationship based? Is it like 50-50, you're still pounding the phones, or what?
I would say it's more 50-50. I mean, I still hit the phones.
Okay.
What I found in my market in La Jolla is, there's really not anybody that has a set business that's doing that. None of the top agents are making calls. They're not knocking doors. They're relying on their network and their history of sales to bring them more business, right? So if you have even somewhat of a track record, which I have now, and you're still doing the cold calls and the door knocks, you're going to get business. Yeah. I mean, I can't tell you. I mean, I've got a showing tomorrow on a $4 million house, cold call. I've got a listing appointment next week for $7 million, cold call, right? So I still do a lot of it, and I love it. I mean, I'm at the point where I've been doing it for 3-4 years now, where I know it's going to bring in business, and I've fallen in love with the process of doing that.
So talking about the cold calling, because we track all of our numbers, we know for us, it takes us about 180 calls to get one escrow.
Gotcha.
So because we're calling on behalf of developers, right? It's usually like a very quick, like, hey, your house is worth $700K. Because you have a big backyard, we can pay you $800K. Are you open to an offer? Yes. If so, it's like a 6-day turnaround from their initial yes to being in escrow.
Gotcha.
Right? So usually we're opening 1 to 2 escrows a week. And we know it takes us about 180 calls roughly to get one property into escrow. What are kind of the KPIs that you track, or something that like you said, if I make the calls, I'm going to get the statistics? Is there a minimum number of calls you have to make, or how does that look?
I mean, I've never been big on like tracking that stuff. For me, I mean, because I'm targeting such a small geographic area, I would probably estimate if you make 150 calls, you might get a couple leads. I would say it's fewer and far between with calls to like actually get from there to like closed escrow. I mean, it's a lot of calls you have to make. But like I said, it's easy to target those areas because it's a small geographic area.
Yeah.
But no, I haven't,
Now
really
what's the initial approach on something like this, right? For us, we have the pitch of like, hey, like I just said, right? We can pay more than what your house is worth.
Yeah.
And we've already done the research on the property on how many units we can build and everything else. What's kind of the approach? Because I'm assuming for you, it's more of let's just start the relationship
100%.
And it might turn into something later.
100%. I mean, very, very rarely do I call and I'm like, hey, like, would you guys ever sell your house? Like, that feels very salesy to me. I hate to be that salesy agent. And, and you've got people that have, a $5, $6, $10 million house, right? And you're calling them, if you come off like that immediately, like you're done, right? So I try to really only call people, like you said, to start that relationship, but really only if I have a reason to call them.
Okay.
Which is, I've got a listing coming in your neighborhood. I just sold something in your neighborhood, or I've got a buyer looking in your neighborhood. Those are the 3 reasons I will call people, because I feel like I'm providing value to them. I don't want to be that agent that calls people for no reason, right? I want to be able to tell them, hey, I just sold your neighbor's house for $6 million. I think you could maybe get 8 because you're bigger, whatever, yada, yada, yada. Or, hey, I've got this listing coming soon. Do you know anybody that might be looking in the neighborhood? Or, hey, I just sold this, or anything like that. I mean, we've had a lot of luck recently with, the low inventory that we have with calling for our buyers. We've got probably a dozen, ready to go buyers right now. And so we'll call and say, hey, look, we wrote an offer on this house, but we didn't get it. Our buyers are qualified. We have proof of funds. Do you think there's any chance in the world you'd ever consider selling your property if we wrote you a great offer? And we've gotten a lot of leads that way. And then the nice thing is if it's a fit for that buyer, awesome, let's try to do a deal. If not, we've already started that relationship with the seller, and then we can nurture that and hopefully turn that into a listing someday.
No, that's a really cool approach. And then, so we've talked about kind of the luxury side and all of that. As far as like you and your career, what are kind of like your immediate goals? Let's just say 2025, and then you 5 years down the line, by 30, where do you want to be? Because the really interesting thing the last time we met is, because you're so low key, I don't know too much about you until I talk to you in person, right? So you're selling real estate, you're making good commissions, this and that. You're not too flashy, you're saving your money, and you've already bought how many properties by the time?
3 now, yeah.
3 properties by 25.
Yeah, all smaller condos, nothing crazy. I mean,
dude, most people don't buy their first, especially in today's market, right?
Well, it's like I always say, like we sell real estate to be able to buy real estate. I mean, you and I both know buying real estate is one of the most tried and true, investing strategies. And a lot of these people, back to the question you asked me earlier, what industry are they in? A lot of these people are in real estate. A lot of them are developers. A lot of them own multifamily. A lot of them have done flips. A lot of them are in some way, shape, or form in real estate, and that's how they've made a large portion of their wealth. And so that's my goal, and I know your goal too, is to continue to invest in real estate and use the money we make from doing other stuff to buy property. Yeah.
And so you've already bought 3 properties. Do you have kind of like, hey, in the next 5 years, I want to hit a certain size portfolio, or what's kind of your plan? 5 years down
Not
the
really
line?
with buying properties, not particularly. I mean, I don't have a goal as far as like, oh, I'd like to have 10 or whatever. Like, you know, when a good deal presents itself, if I have the ability to take advantage of it, I want to be able to do that. You know, I would like to buy as many rental properties as I can. If that ends up being, you know, 2 in the next 5 years, great. If that ends up being 5 in the next 5 years, it is what it is. I just want to be able to put most of my money that I'm making back into my business and be buying, you know, income producing property.
Got it. And I know the other side of it is not only what you're doing with your investments, but I have seen you go back to the school you went to and speak to the students and start to leave your legacy, right? I mean, you're from Colorado, you're new, relatively new to San Diego, yet you're already making an impact in the future generation, you know, that's coming right behind us. What's kind of your plan as far as leaving a legacy, or what's some of the advice you're giving some of those kids when you go and speak to them?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I'm super lucky that I don't know, I went to Point Loma, which is a small school. I got to be very well connected with, you know, the professors and the people that run the business department there. So, you know, they asked me to come back once a semester and talk to the, you know, the real estate class. And it's cool to see every semester I go back, the real estate class keeps growing and growing.
Because of you, man.
I don't know. It's not because of me. I think like I got into real estate. People watch these shows and they think it's interesting, or they hear about someone that's in real estate. It's a popular business to want to be in.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it's fun to go back, but it's also great to be able to educate them on what it's actually like being in real estate. Because you and I both know real estate's not like these shows, and a lot of people, that's what they think. And I go there and I'm like, look, you're probably not going to make any money for a year, and everyone's like, oh my God, I don't want to do real estate anymore, right? But it's just giving them the reality of, if you want to be an agent, if you want to go into my area, which is sales, here's what to expect and here's what you should do to prepare yourself to get into that. And I love it. I mean, you know, I'm not at the point where I feel like I'm like the expert in, you know, giving back to these people and talking to them. Like, I haven't done a tenth of what I want to do with my career, but it's nice to be able to provide, you know, some expertise on what I've experienced so far.
Now, I think one of the like biggest values when you do that is they see your age and they see it a lot more doable than if, you know, John Doe came in with 40 years of experience and told them how to do it.
For
right?
sure, yeah.
So
it's
when
more relatable.
Yeah, when they see somebody our age in their early 20s, they're like, okay, that could be me in 3 or 4 years rather than me in, you know, 4 decades.
100%.
Right? So I think, one, you're leaving that legacy. Have you ever seen, because there's a lot of people, and you know, I went to SDSU, and there's a lot of people that go to those clubs, and you know, they go for the free pizza and whatever, right? And then they don't take any action with it, right? They put it in their notebook, they throw it that.
It's like 90% of people. I mean, I tell everyone, every time I go talk, I'm like, hey, look, if you guys ever have any questions about real estate, you have my cell phone number, call me, text me, like I'll get back to you at some point. And I would say out of like the 5 or 6 times I've been back, I've maybe had like 15 people reach out to me, which is a good amount.
Yeah,
but,
that's a lot.
I mean, compared to there being 50 kids in the class and, you know, 2 or 3 each time reach out, it's not that many. So, I mean, I think a lot of people are interested in it, but not to the point where they're going to take any action.
Got it. And do you think that's kind of like a good sign of the people that might actually make it?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. If you're being proactive enough, I mean, I think being proactive is the biggest thing in real estate, right? That's how I got, you know, my internship. That's how I get business and have gotten all my business, is by being proactive, right? If you just sit there and you wait for things to happen for you, it's never going to happen, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, the kids that are reaching out, asking questions, I think if they were to get into real estate, if they carry that with them, they're going to be able to be successful.
Yeah, and I think I saw a statistic recently. I saw 2 of the same statistic. One said 71, one said 74% of agents, and I'm sure you've seen it, didn't do a single deal last year, right?
I believe it.
So just on that, I know I'm in the top 26%, right? Because I at least did one. So I think a lot of it has to do with that, like being proactive. Now that I run a team, I'm trying to like instill that in them as well, because they're also in their early 20s, and it's like, a lot of the stuff, like yesterday, my cold calling session, right? I found out about a special assessment at a HOA complex, and it was like, okay, boom, like these people have a motivation to sell. Let's go ahead and 100%. Hop on the phones. Where I think most agents would see that and be like, oh, that sucks. And then nothing, nothing happens.
You have to take action. Like, no matter what business you're in, whether it's real estate, whatever, you have to take action, right?
Yeah.
And you have to be ready for opportunities. If you're sitting in the office and you're making calls and you're getting leads and you're not following up on them, if you're not being proactive and dropping off marketing or being in front of those people, I mean, it doesn't matter how hard you work. If you're not actually going and doing anything with the results of that work, you're never going to make it.
Yeah. And just to kind of finish off here, one of the things that, I've always admired about you as well is you work really hard. You obviously get the results. You don't post too much about it, but I know you're putting in the time. But you've also found a good balance in life, right? There's a lot of hobbies that we've shared in common, from surfing, even though you're way better than me at that. You're involved with, you were golfing for some time. I don't know if you still are, but how do you find kind of time to do both things? One, a balance, and then how do those hobbies and interests outside of the real estate industry actually help you perform better?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to have balance, right? No matter what business you're in. I mean, I'm all for working hard and working long hours and, making the calls all day, but it's very easy to burn out if that's all you're doing.
I've burned out a couple
and
times.
For a while, I was going to say, for a while, that's all I was doing, right? Go on calls, go to appointment, come home, eat, sleep, gym, whatever, and it just gets repetitive. So, I mean, you have to take time to do the things you like to do. What I've tried to do is I've tried to find things that I can do that I enjoy.
Are you like intentional about it now?
Where I can still take time to do that, but also I might meet someone who is looking to buy or sell or do something where I'm around a certain type of clientele, like the gym I go to. All the big people in La Jolla that have money go to that gym, right? So I like working out, but I'm also in proximity to these people that I want to work with. Or golfing, right? Same thing. Go out to these nice courses, you might meet someone. So it's all stuff I like to do, but there's still a work angle to it. And I think that's the best way to do it. Do I still do stuff that has nothing to do with work, where I'm never going to meet someone who wants to buy or sell? Of course I do. But the majority of the things that I do for myself in my free time are still angled towards, hey, maybe I'll get something from this.
Got it. So you've kind of like tailored your lifestyle to also be in close proximity to some of these people.
I mean, I heard a saying, it was probably like 4 or 5 years ago before I was really into the business. And it was basically along the lines of like, proximity is power. Yeah. Which means if you're trying to infiltrate, a certain geographic area, if you're trying to work with a certain type of client that's in this area, you have to be in that area. And that's a big reason why I moved to La Jolla. I moved to La Jolla this time last year, and my business, tripled from the year before that to last year. And I think a lot of that was I was just in the scene. I was in town. I was going to the gym. I was going to the restaurants, meeting these people. I have the ability to go pop to an appointment and then go home and go pop to something else. It wasn't a 30-minute drive home every time, right? Yeah. So I truly feel like being in proximity to the people you want to work with is huge.
Interesting. Now, just a secondary thought to that, if you're involved in the community like you have been, right, and you really planted yourself in that geographical area, how many times has it been where maybe you don't meet somebody at the gym, right, but you're at a listing appointment or you're talking to somebody, the conversation of the gym comes up and you guys happen to go to the same place?
100%.
Right?
All the time. All the time. It's so funny. I was in the sauna at the gym. This is probably a month ago.
Okay.
And these two guys were just shooting the shit, right? These two older guys. And I kind of recognize one of the guys. He's an investor. He's done some flips. But his buddy, I had no idea. And I was just talking to him. I'm like, hey, by chance, like, you guys are in real estate. I'm in real estate. And he goes, oh yeah, you're Sanjay. I go, yeah. Like, he goes, I came through one of your open houses last year. Like, I live in that neighborhood, yada, yada.
Really?
Not looking to do anything,
yeah.
But it was this cool connection just, from, shooting the shit in the sauna and having the knowledge of, who's in the community.
Yeah, you never know. So a couple key takeaways, for the audience and things that I took away. One is what we just talked about, tailoring your lifestyle. And one of the things that I've never done, and I'm going to start doing, is really doing research on the client itself, right? Not just the property and what the property can do and everything else, but really seeking to understand their side of the industry, right? Maybe their job, and really getting more well-versed. And lastly, you talked about, you can either have the knowledge or you can have the track record. And for our age, the knowledge is the most important. So being able to learn more and spend more time educating myself, I think that's something that are key takeaways that I'm going to start to implement. And maybe if we do another one a year from now, see how that played out.
We can do it on your yacht.
We'll see on the wakeboarding boat. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, Sanjay, again for coming out and giving your insight on that specific side of the industry with the luxury. And again, for any of the listeners, how can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram. It's just first name, last name, Sanjay Solomon, Facebook, all that good stuff. Anywhere you'd find anybody else.
And soon to be on Netflix if you're not already.
I don't know if I can do a Netflix show. Maybe a billboard coming soon somewhere, but we'll see.
Coming soon. Awesome. Thank you guys for joining me.